Welcome to my talk on theatrical distance. I really want to emphasize how important it's going to be for you to go back and read this presentation. I'm going to give you a fairly quick overview. This is based on an article I wrote several years ago in which I discussed a phenomenon called theatrical distance and its application to music and specifically opera. So this deals with in a more technical detail about theatrical effects, which not a lot of people discuss in relation to music, but music has a profound effect on how we experience drama, and obviously that's central to opera. So I'm going to give you a quick overview. I want you to read carefully. What is theatrical distance? So theatrical distance is a phenomenon that you experience it whether you know it or not. Everyone does that goes to the theater, and in fact you experience it not just at the theater but in all forms of encounters in everyday life. There are moments where you are intimate or close to someone, and that means that there's very little distance. Distance is metaphorically speaking. It might be literal as well. When you're speaking to your friends, there's little or no distance between you. However, when a professor is giving a lecture, there's a considerable distance. When there's a lot of distance or considerable distance, then you're reluctant to interact. You don't speak back to a professor very often in the middle of a lecture. In a seminar, it's less distance, so you are encouraged to talk and converse with your professor. There's still a little bit of distance, though, almost always. Well, in the theater, this is understood, but of course, this is not universally understood. Try bringing a baby to a theatrical performance or a concert. They don't get the distance, and they'll cry or talk or have to be taken out. So, but experienced listeners, experienced concert goers, experienced theater goers understand this implicitly. And it's the sense that what's on stage is separate from real life, separate from you and the audience. And particularly in theatrical performance, that what's going on stage is not real, but a play. So this is a tacit awareness. Now, important to this is how much distance we experience between us and what we view on stage, or whether it be a concert or an opera or a play, is our emotional engagement. And the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre described this in terms that he said the more emotion that we feel, the more emotion that a performance evokes in us, the more we are inclined to believe what we see. So if we're inclined to come to the point of tears, then at least our hearts are believing what we see, even if our brains know it's just a movie or it's just a soprano pretending to die on stage. Let me just back up a little bit. So I'm using these schemes here you see, very simple, to pretend this is a stage here where the play is and the audience is sitting out here. So this line here identifies the theoretical distance, this metaphorical distance. So by the way, the next little part here I talk about playwrights, particularly the German playwright Bertolt Brecht, who deliberately try to create distance, and he's quite conscious of it. He's one of the first people to discuss this phenomenon. And he was very suspicious of the kind of attachment that 19th century drama, and particularly 19th century opera, inspires. He sought in his plays and his operatic collaborations with Bertolt Brecht to distance the audience deliberately, to make them not believe and not feel emotions. So, but Bertolt Brecht is not the first person to use this effect. He's the first person to kind of talk about it. I don't know why I did that. So, anytime you see a parody, then that itself promotes distance. And often you will see, particularly in comic opera, characters who are consciously lying, and you're supposed to know that they're lying. So they have to create, that is, they're either pretending to be someone else or dress up as someone else. Carabino, when he dresses as a woman, is acts in a particularly exaggerated way, so that you can tell, an awkward way, so that you can tell that this is a man pretending to be a woman. This is made all the more interesting and funny, knowing that Carabino is a trouser role and a woman is playing it. So there's sort of a triple distancing going on there. It's a woman playing a man playing a woman. Richard Strauss recreates the same effect in his opera, Rosenkavalier, in reference back to A Marriage Figaro. Così fan tutte is an opera that is full of parody and deceit. It's the whole opera is based on a bar bet where the lead men are wagered that they can that their wives will be their fiancés will be faithful to them, and the cynical Don Alfonso thinks otherwise. So they stage this entire game where the two men come back disguised as Albanians, that is in Turkish costume, and they try to seduce each other's lover. In addition to this elaborate disguise, the chambermaid Despina is brought is in even more farcical disguises, first as a doctor in the Act 1 finale, and then later as a judge in the Act 2 finale. This is especially comical. So this music, of course, when you're watching it, you know that it's all a joke. And so, but the music itself, aside from the costumes and the actions on stage, the music itself signals that it's not really to be taken seriously. But that's a much more subtle effect. So when I show this schematically, that you have this so-called real play, which is of course not real at all, it's still a play, but the exaggerated play promotes even greater sense of distance, and so you've got these two levels of distance. This is important. It's a stock feature of comic drama. Shakespeare uses it. We see plays within a play in Hamlet and his other works. So this is not a new phenomenon. It's not a modern phenomenon. It's a phenomenon that's been characteristic of the theater in Europe since the Renaissance. So now let's talk about music specifically. A musicologist, Naomi Cumming, wrote a very interesting and perceptive article in which she analyzes how we can listen to music. I'm not talking about singing, I'm just talking about music, in this case a violin. And you'll hear a violin playing when you go through and read this. How we project onto the instrumental music a persona that we can identify with. Now this is entirely our imagination, but we're prompted to do this, and there's a lot of theoretical mumbo-jumbo that justify this, but I think you'll find when you hear this music and you'll realize that that's exactly what's going on. And so going back to what Sartre says, that if we are emotionally attached to the music, then we believe it. It's sincere. And we adopt, at least provisionally, those emotions. So this is an interesting, so that means that expressive music, and now we come into operatic singing, expressive operatic singing, is emotionally engaging. So does that mean we believe what's going on stage? Well, not necessarily, because it's also highly stylized. So if we think of a bel canto aria, like Casta Diva, it's beautiful. It is emotionally engaging. But it's also, from a theatrical standpoint, quite distancing. Singing itself is quite distancing, especially this highly stylized operatic singing of bel canto style. So, in that regard, naturalistic speaking, while emotionally not necessarily engaging at all, it can be, but it's certainly not as engaging as music. But it is more naturalistic. It's much closer to our discourse. So from a theatrical standpoint, actually speaking on stage, and to a lesser degree, but sacco recitative, is theatrically more engaging, or at least It's closer to the realm that the audience's experience, reality. So hence, it's more real. So the upshot of all of this is that the the distance in a stage play and distance in an opera are, all other things being equal, fairly constant. Um, if we're more engaged by operatic singing, we're also more distanced by the fact that these singers are up on stage singing, which is not the way people act naturally. On a stage, when people are speaking, they are acting naturally and closer to our realm of discourse. But they're not necessarily that emotionally engaging because they're not, because music is not involved. Carefully read that. That's a very subtle point. This all it is played out in a very interesting way in Leoncavallo's I Pagliacci, late 19th century. So we have here in this opera, and I encourage, I've given you a lot of excerpts from this opera, the majority of it, and I encourage you to watch it. The kind of pregnant melody I've discussed is extremely expressive and generally not so emotionally engaging. So we're poor Canio, who's so distraught over his wife's infidelity. We feel for the guy. It's hard not to hear his reedy Pagliacci and not want to cry. Ironically, Leoncavallo makes as much as possible of this irony. He's in a Commedia dell'arte troupe, so he's getting ready at that very moment, putting on his clown makeup to go on stage and be the character who has his wife stolen from him. And the woman playing Colombine is his wife. And the man playing Harlequin, who steals men's wives, is her lover, Silvio. So that, of course, is comic. It's highly, this is very interesting production, by the way. It's also a Zeffirelli film. You'll get to see Commedia dell'arte, the kind of shtick of Commedia dell'arte. But in this case, it's all the more artificial in the context of a very realistic, at least emotionally realistic opera. But that distance collapses when Canio can't hold his emotions. He can't mask his emotions with his clown makeup. It bursts out, his anger bursts out, and you will see the tragic turn of events as the comedy turns very real and very ugly. So zip through that. Now, La Bohème. The title of this lecture is Why We Cry at La Bohème. And this, I want you to spend quite a bit of time with. The end of La Bohème is probably the most emotionally engaging. If that doesn't make you cry, then nothing in the theater or opera will. And Puccini shows that he understands precisely how to make the audience attach. And I think he understands expressive singing, of course, is emotionally engaging. But he also understands, at the very end of the opera, that recitative and even at the very end, spoken dialogue, something that you almost never hear in Italian opera, is theatrically engaging. That it basically the audience lets down their guard. And then at the moment when she dies, the orchestra re-enters. The orchestra's dropped out while they're speaking. And orchestra re-enters with this emotionally pulverizing melody from earlier in the act. And it's just one of the most remarkable moments. So I encourage you to, I've got this whole last, basically 10 minutes of the opera. Encourage you to watch this production if you, it's a remarkable one. The only version online is, I've got German subtitles, but I've given you the text here for the very end. So enjoy that, and do read carefully.